Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of videos. Today we are on day 10 of analysing our classical rated games. This was another position that I played on chess.com using my squared off board. It was a bit of an interesting position. I got myself into, had a nice position, and hopefully I've managed to sort of have a nice steady game throughout. But we'll see how the game progressed as we went on. So I started with the move e4, d5 was played, so entering into the Scandinavian defence. A slightly uncommon opening, but it does come up quite a bit in club play and also online chess, so it's worth knowing what to do against it. I myself used to play the Scandinavian defence. In fact, it was my first ever opening that I ever learnt was the Scandinavian. I had some good results when I was younger. It certainly did its job when I was learning to get better at the game. I also played some really fun unorthodox lines with the Scandinavian. I'll just show you one very briefly. After e takes d5, which is what was played, queen takes d5. The normal response is knight to c3, and you see this probably about 90% of the games that you play when you're playing the Scandinavian. And against this, I used to play queen to e5, which you may think is a dreadful move, but in fact this is a funny variation called the Patzer variation, and the idea being that actually we're not really losing a tempo in this position, because after bishop to e2 blocking the check, we're going to play c6, and then we're going to move the queen back to c7. So it'd be the same as if it went to a5, then c6, and then going back to c7. Meanwhile, white, although it looks like he's developed something, he in fact has to play this bishop again. So these two pieces are slightly misplaced. They're going to have to move again in the position. So just a fun little line that I remember using to play, and it was used to throw my opponents a little bit off guard when they saw that, and it was oddly satisfying to play a check on move 3 and say check to my opponent. But there we go. So in this position, so after queen takes, as I say, I play a lot. I've played a lot against Scandinavian players, and I kind of know what to do in a lot of positions. I have actually, just very quickly, I have also played the move knight to c3 quite a lot. It's a pretty good line. After a5, I been experimenting more on sort of blitz with this move, but the move b4. A very funny line. The idea being after b takes on b4, rook to b1. And this is the idea. We're going to fianchetto the bishop on g2 and then hit the pawn on b7. Very interesting idea. So we regain that pawn, and you can see I'm getting quite a lot of activity for the loss of the games of the pawn. And meanwhile, black is probably going to have to spend another couple moves, in fact probably 3 moves, to get the queen back into safety. So certainly interesting line. Hikaru Nakamura has played this line apparently in 2007. So as I always say, if it's good enough for a strong super GM, then it's good enough for me. So there we go. Right, so going back to the position. So after queen takes, I decided to play the move knight f3. So I've been experimenting with this line recently, and the idea being I'm going to push these pawns a little bit later, and I don't have to worry about this knight move potentially being misplaced, if that makes sense. So delaying the development of it just for a few moves until these pawns have moved up. I have to move bishop to g4, bishop to e2, knight to f6. I now play d4. So I'm getting ready that idea of pushing on c4. You play the move knight to c6. I played c4, and now black's got a bit of a decision here to make. Where does he put the queen? The best move in this position, and the most frequently played move, is queen to f5, which, as I say, is probably quite a difficult move to find over the board. It's a bit of a funky looking move, if anything. It does allow me to now play the move bishop to e3 and just get on with my development, but the idea is black's going to castle long, and he's got a little bit of pressure on this pawn, so it's certainly an interesting position. It's not these pieces that have all been employed by black are very, very annoying. He's actually ahead in development, so if anything, there's going to be some complications. There's also ideas of pushing this e5 pawn as a potential break at some point. So certainly an interesting line, but nonetheless, my opponent played queen to d8, so still maintaining there's still a threat here on capturing this pawn. Bear in mind, just so you know, they can't capture this this pawn straight away. Oh, actually, I think I did a move too late. Actually, after this, oh, did I move too late? No, I haven't. Sorry. Oh yes, sorry. If I do another move, actually, instead of playing c4, I can also play h3, and there's a slight trap in this. If after bishop takes an f3, bishop takes an f3, they have to play the move queen to d7. If they capture this pawn, thinking they were up a piece, they will lose immediately to bishop takes on c6, and you can see the queen is hanging here. So another little tricky line. I might have a look into that, playing h3 first instead of playing c4 immediately. In any case, c4 was played. Queen ran back to d8. I played bishop to e3, and the only other move that's been played in this position was d5. So there's no more master games on this, but on the Lead Chess database there's still about 700 games from this position, and white has scored really well in this. If I look at the computer, it's already saying 1.5 plus, and I think you can maybe see why white's getting a really nice center going here. He's going to have some very smooth development and a big space advantage very soon. After e6 was played, a very logical move to get the bishop out, I castled. Bishop came to e7. I played knight to c3. Castles. I played a3. This just had the idea of expanding on the queen's side. So what I eventually want to do is revolves around this pawn structure here. So I've got a 4-3 majority, and I want to create a pass pawn along this side. So if I can start the queenside expansion now, I can start building that advantage for me. And I guess it's a little bit easier for me to do it on the queen's side, doing the 4-3 then. My opponent's pass pawn is on the king's side, but of course if he moves any of these pawns, he's risking his king in the process, so it's something to bear in mind. But I've always got to make sure I can do this as fast as I can, because if I leave it a bit too late, my opponent can create his own attack, a minority attack, with these pawns to potentially isolate one of my pawns here. So some interesting plans with the pawns. So I played the move a3. As I said, that just my idea of preparing a6, and here my opponent really should have just played a5. The idea being that it's a little bit more difficult to push this b4. I can still do it. There will be a few sort of trades, but I don't want to do it straight away. One idea I might have to do then would be get the rook across from f to b1 and then push up that way. But it just stalls me out a little bit. You know, there's also potential ideas of even just pushing the pawn even further, and then plonking like a knight into there potentially. So there's some sneaky ideas going along there. In any case, in the actual game, a6 was played, so I was quite happy to see this move. b4 was played. My opponent played b6, a bit of a sad compromising move, and it creates now a weakness on the light diagonal. You can see here that this knight, if I can get a bishop over here somehow, this is going to be a very nice skewer for me. So in any case, I just played sensible moves here. I played queen to d2, so just connecting up the rooks. And the move bishop to f5 was played, and here I played a sort of quite a little weak move here because I just lose a tempo out of it. I played the knight to h4, which really isn't a great move. I really should have just played normal looking moves like rook to f to d1. After this move, this knight to e4 plan, which is what he was going to do anyway, comes with some clout as now it's hitting my queen on d2. So I have to capture this off, and if he captures on e4 like so, I've actually just lost tempo, and really my advantage dissipates massively here. The engine gives it plus 0.2 as black has just gained back some valuable time. He's going to be able to get his pieces to good squares because he's got that extra move in hand. But instead what he played here was bishop takes on h4, which I was quite surprised to see, because now I got my bishop to f3 and now threatening this discovered attack, and queen came to d7 just to guard the knight. I went knight to g3, there was a capture, again quite happy to see that, it's given up the bishop pair, and I took here h takes on g3. So we now did rook a to d8, just getting out of that pin for the knight, so breaking the pin. I then got my rook onto this lovely d5. As I say, this is going to be my big push, will be along here, because this is the only, I guess, potential passer in my position. I have a very comfortable position here now. Black hasn't really got any good pawn breaks without losing material. So, as I say, right now my main goal is just to get my pieces to good squares and slowly build up a decent pawn break. And then really, I suppose, just sort of stop black from achieving any of his plans. So he played knight to e7. I then played actually bishop to g5, a little probing move. I was hoping to create like a little target here. He should have played h6 actually, which was probably a little bit better, as now my bishop just has to run back. But I guess I think he was a little bit worried about this potential bishop takes idea. But it doesn't actually work. After bishop takes, g takes, h takes, bishop to g6. Black actually defends really comfortably here, so he's doing absolutely fine. But instead, after bishop to g5, my opponent played f6, and this now creates a little target for me. I've got this potential pawn that's a little bit weak. I can maybe focus a bit of firepower against in the future. I played my bishop back to f4, and he played g5, which again I was very happy to see. It just creates loads of weaknesses now. These pawns are just massive targets that I can eventually hit, hopefully later in the position. The good news is I wasn't tempted by the move bishop takes on g5. This totally loses. I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, should I play it? And I just couldn't really see a good continuation. After f takes on g5, queen takes on g5, knight to g6, there's not really any issue in black's position. He's defended quite comfortably. He's up a pawn. He should be able to do fine in this position. So I was glad I didn't do that. So I resisted temptation. And, you know, as I say, I think it's important, once again, there's no point in ruining a good position. So I played my bishop back to e3. I've still got a comfortable edge here. I've got a lovely space advantage to play with. Bishop came back to g6. So I think the idea of getting the knight into f5. So I stopped that plan immediately. Just played g4. b5. Oh, sorry. Bishop to f7 now. I did queen to c3, so I want to get my rooks onto this open file, because when the pawn break happens, this queen will need to move. Knight came to g6. I played rook to d2, and my plan, as I say, was just to get the other rook to d1 and potentially think about pushing in the centre. b5 was played. Very happy to see this move, as I just captured the pawn. After a takes, now rook to c1, and it's very difficult to defend this pawn now. There's not really any good move. If he tries to do a passive move like rook to c8, I've got two quite strong continuations. The one I was thinking in my head was just bishop to b7, and where does this rook go? If he goes to b8, I can actually just bank on my advantage here and just take here. Oh no, maybe I can't actually. I tell a lie. I can't capture that. So bishop to c6 first, sorry, and after I can move, let's say, queen to d6. I'm doing fine here. I can potentially get a queen over and start hitting this pawn. I've got a lot of pressure in any case. One other idea, I'm just looking at the engine. D5 looks pretty good. Just pushing that pawn break now, as that comes with some venom. So after e takes, I can do bishop to c5. Oh, that's a powerful move. Okay. Alright, so it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. So there's some all kinds of little threats here and there. So that's what wasn't played in the position. So instead of this, so after this, he just played knight to e7, allowing me to take the pawn. Again, I can just play e5. I think d5 is a little bit more accurate. There's a long continuation, which leads to me having a very good position. So it's a long tactical line, but it just, again, I wasn't really, I didn't really want to calculate that far. I just thought, well, I'll just get a pawn. So a pawn's a pawn, simple move, and I'm still winning. So it's not the end of the world. The other way would have maybe got me an extra pawn or something. So yeah, interesting. Knight to d5, and weirdly enough, my opponent just actually resigned after playing this move. So I was a little bit surprised with him doing so. I am winning, but there's still chances in the position, particularly if this knight swaps with my light squared bishop, because there's a potential endgame of opposite coloured bishops. You can see here that they're on opposite coloured squares. So I'll just show you what I mean by that. So after a few exchanges, let's say we swap off quite a few material here. This position is one sec. This position here is only a slight edge because of these two. If all the rooks came off in this position, this would probably be an easy draw, as black's light square bishop can defend the resulting bishop and pawn endgame. So it's no wonder actually here it's only giving it about maybe 0.7 of an advantage, although I'm up a pawn, and let's face it, black's pawn structure is pretty rubbish here. So that's the position. That was the game basically. So I hope you enjoyed it. As I say, I'll hopefully get some more of these videos ordered. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well if you haven't already. But otherwise, guys, have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Take care.